Welcome back to another episode of PSL Daily Download, your first stop to all things real estate in Port St. Lucie. Today is May 8th, 2024. Happy Wednesday. Hope you're having a great, productive week so far. My name is Jaime, first of all, and I appreciate you returning to the channel. Before I get started, I am kind of excited about today's show because I'm going to talk about what the difference is between today and let's say the last 40 years of mortgages. So that will include 2008 because I get a lot of questions about that. So I'm going to touch on some of the difference that I see. Again, not to convince you one way or the other because there's a lot of factors that played out back then and are playing out today, but just some perspective to take into account when you're thinking about 2008 or any other time of period in the last 40 years compared to today. So we will get to that in a minute. But before we do, let's look at where inventory is. And I'll mess around with these charts. So let me get back here. All right. So I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before, I touched on some trends that I'm seeing, and the trends are continuing. It looks like inventory continues to go down. It dropped from 2356 to 2326, a drop of 1.27%. And month to date, we're actually down. We're reversing the trend that we've seen honestly, over the last year. And that is down 1.77%. Homes listed under 375 dropped from 597 to 591. Homes above 375 dropped from 1757 to 1733. Homes that are reduced. Now, we are seeing more homes reduced, at least on realtor.com, and that increased from 662 to 691, and a pretty sizable increase of 438. So it looks like sellers are starting to get a little bit more aggressive on their pricing. And then lastly, homes that are listed for rent also increased just a little bit, just under 1%. But actually, if you take into account the last couple of days, we've seen sizable increase, 413 to 417 yesterday, and again we are right at that 399 month to date, which I think we were there either yesterday or the day before. All right, let's jump to Mortgage News Daily's daily rate survey. Let me make sure that's in this screen there. All right, perfect. So again, Mortgage News Daily tracks a list of lenders, and this is their survey that from the lenders that they track. These are as of last closing of the last business day. I'm gonna get that one day. All right. So as of closing Tuesday. 30-year fix, they had it at 7.19. That is down 0.06%. The FHA, they had it at 6.62, down 0.02%. I am getting price updates for this morning, and it looks like they actually increased a little bit, about 13 basis points on the pricing, not on the rate. Okay, let's jump to U.S. mortgage news watch here, U.S. market. And we'll see that it's kind of a mixed bag. Dow is up, Nasdaq, S&P are down a little bit, and the 10-year Treasury yield is at 4.481, an increase of 0.02, which is relates to 0.448% increase, which kind of coincides with what I just mentioned, rates being a little bit higher this morning on the pricing. All right, let's jump to the article I want to talk about. So this is on Mortgage News Daily. Again, the same website I get the rates report. So I was looking for a good topic to talk about, and I came across this article. Now, it's not really the article that I want to talk about, but I did want to make sure everyone knows where I got this information or the chart that we're going to talk on. But this is Mortgage News Daily's article. It's titled "Economic Data Cools Rates, Boost Application Volumes" by Jane, 3 hours and 20 minutes ago. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to scroll down here, and sorry, I'm going to make sure it's on the right screen here. So the top chart is for refinances. I won't even get into that. As you can see, this is low, all this, not a lot of transactions. And I'll explain what these charts mean here in a minute. So the line, this orange line that we see kind of squiggling down here and then coming back up, you probably guessed it correctly. Those are mortgage rates, right, that they've been tracking. Now this the grayed out area, these are volume. There's a volume chart. So basically we can see where the volume goes up and down and so forth. So this chart actually goes back to the early 70s, 71. But you can see they weren't tracking mortgage volumes before 1990. So that's why it's blanked out. We could only see what happened after that. So we're really not sure how mortgage volume was over here. I could assume it was less only because of population growth, things like that since the 70s, which the United States has grown a lot since then. And number of homes and all that. So anyway, but the reason why I want to talk about this because we get a lot of comparisons, right? In conversation I've had with realtors and even buyers that they're like, hey, 2008 versus today. Well, mortgage rates, they're 7%, but back in 1980, they were 20%, and, it was just fine then. So these are normal rates. So I get a lot of different things um, thrown at me, and I try to give kind of the perspective that it's not the same. And sometimes it's hard to explain that in words, at least for me. So I'm using a chart to better explain it. Take into account that I'm trying to show as factual information that I can here. It's not to sway my opinion one way or the other. But if I kind of say this is what I'm thinking, obviously I'm relating to that is my opinion. That's not a fact. So I'll kind of try to separate these. So we're going to take this as a fact. I don't have the information to be able to research that this is accurate, but I'm going to take it for what it is, and we'll have a conversation around it. So we're going to start because the big thing that kind of points out is this chart. So I'm going to start right here. I'm going to kind of stop at the end here, at the top of the bar. Again, this goes back to 1970, and it goes all the way till now, to the most current week here. So as we can see, mortgage rates prior to 1981 were lower than they were in 1981. Obviously, there were inflation issues and prices were increased because they were kind of similar to today. They were fighting inflation. Back then was a lot worse and a lot stickier for a lot of different reasons, but they had to increase rates up to 18%. And we could see that chart right here. We don't know how that physically affected volume because, again, it wasn't tracked. But what we could see is that this is not normal. Whenever I hear people tell me, well, back in 1980, the rates were 18% or 20 years or whatever, mortgage rates are still historically low. Not so much, right? Like they were actually that high from let's see here, 1980, we could see there all the way through, let's go halfway here to 1982. So yes, they were higher. And yes, I'm sure transactions were done, but we're talking about a maybe 2, maybe 3 year period, if you want to extend that out a little bit, um, compared to 40 years that you see here. So that's not a lot of time. So generally speaking, that is not a normal rate. Okay, so if we exclude this, we could see where the rates are kind of somewhere in the middle here. Okay, that is my opinion. Like I mentioned, but again, we could see that it was not normal for the last 40 years to be at 18%. All right, so the next thing I want to point out is the rates have consistently. So if I actually go kind of right about here or somewhere around there, and I draw a line, you could literally see where a straight line would actually cut through the median of these numbers right up to about here, about 2021. Rates consistently went down for the last, I don't know, 30 years maybe, let's assume. So because rates go down, as anyone in the mortgage industry knows, right, or real estate industry, when rates go down, it supports transaction. It supports higher prices. Why? Because if today you finance at 5%, $200,000, and the rate drops to 3%, that means you could buy now what I say, 200,000 or let's say 300,000, whatever. You could buy a higher priced home and still keep your payment the same. So this downtrend has, for the last 30 years, and I won't get into all the reasons because I have a lot of thoughts why this is and why I don't like it. But um, that has supported higher prices. That has supported more home ownership, all of those things, which are good things, right? Everyone should own a home for the most part. Um, and this trend in lowering of rates has supported that. Okay. So I'm going to start with the first difference. The first difference is that as of 2021, it has never really been, again, I'm only talking about 40 years. I don't want no one come back in like 1927 and, 1805. I don't care. But we're talking about the last 40 years. That's enough. That's my lifetime. So plus a few. Um, the last 30 to 40 years has supported increases in real estate. Mortgage rates have continued to come down. Again, I could draw a straight line and all the way down to 2021, they were consistently going down. Okay. On a medium. So now I'm going to kind of go over. Now you're going to see this gray bar, the gray come up. Now those are transaction volumes, right? So, and I made a couple of notes because I didn't want to forget to hit on some of these. So the second thing I want to talk about, or maybe the third at this point, is we hear that it's a bubble. Oh, it's a bubble. We were in the mortgage bubble 2008, and now we're in another mortgage bubble. Yes or no, it doesn't matter. But what I will tell you that if there is a bubble, they're just different. Again, we can't compare 2008 to today. In 2008, and I'm going to circle this area right here, right? And again, when I say 2008, I'm talking about more of the event than that 1 year. So just to clarify, this event, this large increase, first of all, it started back in 1991. Like you could literally go down. I don't know if it kept going down further than that. We don't know. But since the beginning of this, we could see that it was already building. Okay. Again, lower prices supports higher transactions and higher prices. Lower rates supports higher prices and higher transaction number of transactions. So we can see where this goes. Now, when we get to this point, the top, which is roughly 2005, right, it started coming down. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, so the first one, the last one that I just mentioned is the bubbles are different if there is, right? 2008 was a transaction bubble, right? We had look at how many transactions we had. Even in 2020, not even close. Now, if you ask a realtor or someone, a general buyer or something like that, or a mortgage officer, you'd be like, "Wow, that was the craziest time." We didn't have any free time. We're closing so many loans, we're pushing clients away. Well, guess what? In 2005, it was a lot more than that. So if you think that was big, I mean, you weren't around 2005 maybe because that was insane. And I remember because I bought a house probably right at the top of that bubble. March of 2021. I bought mine in May of 2021. I'm sorry, 2005. So it was right up there when I bought my previous home. So the bubbles are different if you want to consider, let's say that there's a bubble now. Back then, it was a transaction bubble, meaning everybody was buying a house, right? The prices may have been elevated, but they weren't insane. Today, we don't have that. We don't have a transaction bubble. As a matter of fact, we're kind of right in the median. If you go right across, nothing really outside of that crazy bubble. The number of transactions are the same, are right where they should be. What now is different is that if you want to consider it a bubble, it would be a pricing bubble or a unaffordability bubble. Why? Why is that happening? For two different reasons. Number one, inflation, right? Number two, because the rates got so low, the prices of the homes went up. And again, going back to lower rates, higher prices. So for that reason itself, 2008, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2020, they're just different if you compare that real estate market with this real estate market, just for those two reasons. Um, the volume also was suppressed in the last few years because of the lock-in effect. In 2020, 21, 22, the rates, generally speaking, were still low. especially the first part of 2022. They were still low. So whoever purchased at that time, they're locked into that home. Generally speaking, they're only selling or refinancing out of those mortgages if they have to, due to a divorce, job, movement, whatever the case may be, death, for whatever reason. The transaction volumes are different back then. Now, that's why that's why you could see the reduced volume here. Now, why did it reduce here from 2005 down to like 2010? Completely different reason. It wasn't because of the rates, and the rates weren't that high. I mean, they're right at what, in the fives. Um, it was because of jobs. Okay. Well, there are other factors. Yes, 1,000 other factors, but the majority of people the economy was slumping. It was hard to find a job. A lot of people lost their job. A lot of investors that had 3 or 4 properties, they couldn't keep up with the payments for whatever reason. The types of financing that was available at that time were insane. So for a lot of different reasons, this dropped, but it wasn't for the same drop that we see here. This drop was affordability. Inflation affected rates because the Fed had to increase rates. And because of inflation, again, it caused everything to be a little bit more expensive, or a lot more expensive, depending on your budget. Um, but affordability has dwindled that down. So as you can see, there are many differences between the early part of the 80s, 2008, and today's real estate market. Again, prices in 1980 of homes were probably a third, probably less, a fifth, a tenth of some priced homes today. 2008 was completely different as well, because it was not a pricing bubble at all. Um, it became quickly an unaffordability bubble because some of the payments were starting to jump on, especially on those non-conventional loans. But keep in mind, and I get this, and I'll touch on this real quickly, is that the majority of loans that got delinquent during the 2008 bubble, right, real estate crash, whatever you want to call it, were Fannie Mae or conventional loans. They were not FHA. They were not these crazy types of loans that you hear about, subprime market. It was not those. It was regular conventional loans, with the majority of loans that defaulted back in 2008. So just keep that into perspective. As I get, subprime was bad, but it gets more of the blame than honestly it should, because there were other types of loans that did affect it. And some would say it's a trigger. Maybe it probably triggered a tsunami of foreclosures and things like that. But at the end of the day, we just live in a different world than those previous markets. So hopefully you found a little bit of value in that. Hopefully it gives you a couple extra things to think about, and it's just not a fair comparison for whatever reason. So not that it's better or worse, it's just different. So what is not different is that if you did like this video, please click that like and that subscribe button. I'm going to go ahead and add a video right over here for you. I appreciate you returning to the channel, and I will see you tomorrow.